didn't expect any early morning drama just yet.
Wow, we really had some issues this morning, didn't we?
Well, that's how it goes.
Can you hear me? Now is my mic not working?
No, it's working.
Okay, all right, thank goodness. All right, Julia, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, perfect.
Good morning.
All right, sorry we're running a little bit late this morning, but we had a little bit of an issue getting our guest on for today. So I think we're all covered now, and I think we're ready to go. How's everybody?
Good.
Okay, so Michael, you may be on and off today, this morning. Okay, so will everybody look out for that? He be on, be off. All right, so I wanted to introduce our guest for today, and Dr. Evans is a medical doctor, and he has been in practice for 36 years, and for 33 years he's been in practice in Edmond, and he has a very unique perspective on transgenderism in our kids and kind of what's going on there. And he became interested in that because he saw that it was becoming a danger to adolescents. And he also believes it's very dangerous to women and girls and has some really negative long-term implications for just womanhood in general. And so we really wanted him to chat with you about that, because it's a different thing having an opinion, and certainly medical, doctors can also have their own opinions, but medical doctors also have a little bit of a different experience and take on things than the rest of us do. So we're going to bring on Dr. Evans this morning and kind of talk to Dr. Evans about this particular issue. So good morning, Dr. Evans. How are you? Uh-oh. And we got to hold on. Let me unmute you. Okay.
It's muted.
There
you go.
Yeah.
We'll get it. We'll get it. So how are you, Dr. Evans?
I'm good. We had a little technical difficulty getting on your Zoom, but we got it worked out. Thanks to my wife.
Awesome. Okay. Well, kind of tell us a little bit about you and let us know. Oops. And then I removed him from the stream, and then I had to get him back in.
Here I am.
Okay. So again, we're working on getting all of these things in a working way. So tell me a little bit about what kind of got you involved in the issue of transgenderism just even in the large scope. What got you interested in this?
So I would give you a little bit of background. I'm actually now have grandkids in the Edmond public school system. My kids are all now having their own kids, but back when my kids were in school, I was very involved. In fact, my wife and I were both very involved in the sex education issues, because there was a lot of liberal sex education going on in the schools, where there was discussion about, in fact, at one point there was a superintendent that I was aware of who said, I don't really ask my kids questions. I have a box or a drawer in my office that's full of condoms, and they're always free to come get a condom if they want to have sex.
Wait, a teacher said this to you?
An administrator.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Back in the 90s, 2000s. So this has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
My wife and I gathered a lot of information on the dangers of sex education from the standpoint that kids are just going to have sex, so just help them just not get pregnant, not get sexually transmitted diseases. So we put together a lot of information on the dangers of STDs and that you can't really prevent those, and that the best sex education is to say, hey, look, kids, you can control your passions and your desires. You just need to have the right reasons to do that, and realize the power of saving sex for your partner, a lifelong partner. And so we were involved in doing that, and wound up kind of coming at odds with some of the people at the state sex education level. And so we kind of early on experienced that, well, there's a lot of things been coming into schools that really weren't the best for our students. So I had that experience, and we did that for probably 10 years. We would meet at schools and assemblies as often as we could find places that would let us in. And then, our kids got out, and we kind of got on with helping them, get their lives going and through college and things like that, and kind of lived life. And then, and then there's always new things coming up. So now the transgender issue has become a big issue. And I would say the way I got involved kind of started with beginning to lose confidence in institutions in general. We can think about the Trump era when he got elected, and then we found out that the FBI actually was involved in leading the Mueller investigation on and lying to the FISA court with things that they knew were false. And yet they carried those things and put our country through a lot of great stress and things like that. And so I began to see problems with some of the institutions that I thought I trusted. And then COVID hit. And what I saw with COVID is what a lot of people saw was that, gosh, the institutions, the schools shut down schools for our kids, not just for the 2 or 3 weeks, but for a year and a half, even when we already knew from evidence that kids were so low risk from getting it, transmitting it, and getting very, very sick with it. And yet the NEA and some of the school unions had power enough to prevent kids from coming back to school, which was hurtful to kids. And then I saw my medical establishments completely collapse and be untrustworthy. I saw, the lying about how much the masks were helpful, the lies about we need to protect everybody rather than just the very elderly. And eventually when the vaccines came on board, even pressuring schools to give young kids vaccines when they were so low risk, even down to 6 months of age, which many of us would say would be child abuse to give these little 6 months and young kids vaccines. And so I saw that even my medical establishment that I had trusted through so many years was giving in to ideology rather than let's take care of people and patients and that type of thing. And so that really began to kind of, as many people kind of opened their eyes to, gosh, we can't trust some of the things, people that I thought I trusted. So that kind of, and then I saw good physicians, well-respected, solid physicians talk about, hey, we need to loosen up the lockdowns. We need to not force people to get vaccines. And that through social media, mainstream media, and then some of the institutions like Fauci with his organization, and then the CDC following suit to actually suppress good information from doctors who weren't following, quote, the party line. So all of that began to affect me. And then I saw medical hospital organizations and medical organizations actually tell doctors, you cannot prescribe some of these other medications that might be useful early on, such as hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. So I saw that being suppressed, and all these things really made me begin to say, gosh, there's these organizations I can't trust. And then I have a outside source newspaper called Epoch Times. And if any of y'all aren't familiar with Epoch Times, it's EPOCH Times, and it's a national newspaper that really reports, I think, from a really reliable.
Yeah, your time's up, I guess, Doctor. I'm just kidding.
No.
Kidding. I'm just
Just
kidding.
getting started.
Saw the reporting mechanisms and that, and I read an article from a teacher, and she had taught for 15 years and finally got out because she could see that teachers were being forced to teach and do things that they didn't trust. And she specifically talked about the NEA and a publication that they had called Schools in Transition. And this really got my attention because the NEA is literally encouraging teachers and administrators to not just be kind and supportive to students who are struggling with gender dysphoria, but to actually have lesson plans and ways where they can actually help these kids move from their transgender feelings to being socially moved towards transitioning, let's say from a girl to a boy or a boy to a girl.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions and let
Yeah.
me point out a couple of things.
Uh-huh.
So, first of all, you're a medical doctor,
Yes.
right? Okay. And you're a general practitioner, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So, you know a little about a lot. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Okay, so it's not like you're not an orthopedist who knows only limbs, right? And I'm sorry if I'm offending any orthopedist out there. I'm sure you're well-rounded. But you have the benefit of a very broad level of training,
Yes.
which is the great thing about a general practitioner. So I wanted to point that out in the first place. And then I wanted to point out something that just to make sure that people actually heard it. So when your kids were in school in Edmond Public Schools, you and your wife actually went into the schools and tried to talk to the administration about how they were teaching sex education, correct?
Yes.
And your idea was that children can actually restrain. They have control over their bodies, and they actually have an ability to make decisions. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so you didn't go into it very much, but because of the fact that I've been kind of where you are in that situation, and I know that, and I've met several of the administrators, like you said, that keep the condoms in their desks so they can pawn them off to kids. So, in case there's an issue, you didn't, your ideas weren't well respected, and you were kind of looked down on by the administration. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, at the state level, there would
Okay.
be teachers. There would be teachers that wanted this, but yeah, at the state level, way back in the 90s, there was already a strong move. And what's interesting about that is you could talk to the individuals. Well, what would you want your son or daughter to do? You want them to wait? And they'd say, "Oh, sure." Well, why don't you want that for the kids in public education? And they basically, I think their view was, we think they're dogs in heat. They can't really control themselves. And so
Yeah.
we just got to. So they demean the real value of the individual person, I believe.
Okay, so then let's build on that. So basically, we're in a position where administration and both of us have been in this position. So this is two of the four of us. So half of us have been in this position and been told the similar things. So the administration basically said, we're not interested in trying to make kids, really control themselves. We're not interested in any real critical thinking here. We just want to hand out condoms and be done with it. So that was the precedent that we're going to kind of start on. So today we're seeing something totally different. We're seeing schools filled with counselors, and we're seeing schools filled with sex clubs. Basically, I'm just going to call them that because whether it doesn't matter what you're talking about. I mean, sex is sex. So full of sex clubs and gender issue. We've got girls competing against boys who want to think of themselves as girls in girl sports. And we've got all of this going on. So so it's clear just from the precedent that you and I have discussed on this, that schools aren't interested in trying to make kids be self-aware, to be self-respecting, to be controlled, right?
Yeah.
And self-confident. That's a good one too. So how do you feel like we've gotten kind of where we are? Or if that's not really even a good topic, let's just talk about what are you seeing in kids as a result of this kind of laissez-faire, we don't believe in self-control kind of an outlook?
Yeah. So I wouldn't condemn every school administrator or teacher, because there are those who do care, and I know you know that.
Right.
What's happened is there's been an ideology kind of from the top down. One of the strengths that we have is if you have local control and you are trying to care for your kids, you can do a good job. But if you've got national control and they're very strong, such as the NEA, they have an influence and an impact with money on forming behavior. So one of the things that I see as a real problem is kids are being abandoned by the adults in the room from the top down. They're being encouraged to think of themselves as how they feel. And so answer to your question about how is this affecting students, one of the things that really impacted me when I looked at it was in the last 7 or 8 years, the number of young girls, pre-adolescent and adolescent girls that are thinking that they are transgender has gone up. And now this number, you won't believe it, but I've looked at it, I've researched it from a number of different perspectives, has gone up 1,000-fold.
Wow.
1,000.
Holy cow.
Yeah, 1,000-fold. Now, here's the numbers. For years, the typical, quote, transgender, the person who thought he was a male, but it was a female and vice versa, was about 1 to 10 or 20,000. And those were more men than girls. That was something that was pretty stable 30, 40 years ago consistently.
Say that number again, 1 in 10?
1 in 10 to 20,000. And most of those were boys. The majority were boys who thought they felt like a girl. Some of those would have sure been homosexual, but some of them felt like they were just a boy and a girl, or a girl in a boy's body. In the last, now the numbers are sometimes in 1 in 30 to 40 girls in some schools are saying that they feel like that they are a boy in a girl's body. So that number from 1 to 20 or 30, 10 to 20,000 now to 1 to 30 is about 1,000-fold increase. And the majority now are girls. So you have
Wow.
to ask yourself the question, so what's impacted that? And most of the experts say social media. The iPhone came on board in about 2007. TikTok, I think, in around 2014 or 15. And you've heard people talk about TikTok and its influence. And apparently that has been a source of so much of this. And some people are calling it a social contagion. And to me, that makes sense, that it is you're depressed, you're anxious. I have a granddaughter who's kind of just been through puberty, and she had some anxiety and struggles, and that's a common thing. And so on TikTok, you've got influencers who are saying that, if you feel down and you're feeling depressed and you're not quite sure what you think about yourself, you probably are a boy. And they're very strong, they're very convincing. So you've got this girls beginning to then interact, and as you guys know, girls are much better than boys at kind of connecting and interconnecting with each other and talking about what's going on in their lives. And so the quote social contagion is similar to what we have seen in the past with things like anorexia or bulimia, even some reports of multiple personality disorder. That seem to be a contagion. That if a young woman is struggling with depression or anxiety, well, probably what you are is you're too fat. You need to stop eating, and you're anorexic and bulimic. And so we see that same kind of contagion socially with transgender and girls that we were seeing with boys. And that's one of the reasons why I said this is really impacting girls. The boy numbers are not really changed a whole lot. It's the girls being on the social media that have just gone up this 1,000-fold.
Well, when I was a kid, and this probably won't freak anybody out that knows me well. When I was a kid, I was scrambling up trees. I was doing everything that the boys were doing. I had no interest in wearing a dress. My poor mother, God rest her soul, would cry because I would not wear a dress. And they, back in those days, they called you a tomboy, and, it kind of hacked you off because you were like, stop it, I'm fine. But there wasn't any more than that. Now, if you have a girl who does that, well, you could be a boy.
Yes.
You might be a boy. So, how I'm so frustrated about the way it's gone. I have a longtime friend who lives in New York, and her kid was in a private Catholic school. And, this started up with her too. And come to find out, there were a couple of girls at school that were influencing it. But just like you said, she had found there are so many predators online. And she had found somebody online that was, whispering in her ear and telling her just the things she needed to hear. And pretty soon, my friend was struggling with the fact that her daughter was telling her that she was gay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the case. And parents are like freaked out. What do I do? And the cultural pressure is so great. Now if somebody says they are a transgender, they're a hero. I mean, they're celebrated as, oh, you are so brave and so courageous,
Yes.
doing the right thing, and the discussion is you are becoming your quote authentic self.
Yes.
Because you feel, and this is one of the things that's, again, where we need adults in the room to help these kids. They don't really know exactly what they want to be. They don't know what they're going to do with their life, and they're trying to sort out. And so they need stable adults to help them through this. And so parents are freaking out thinking, well, maybe they are gay, or maybe they are a boy in a girl's body. And we always called her Jenny, but now we're going to have to call her Joe. What do we do about it? And so here's some really, really important things and data that parents need to hear. prior to the social contagion and prior to the media pushing this and the social media and unfortunately the medical community, here again, the medical community is
Yes.
and I'm just disgusted, but we have to take it what it is. So here's very important information for parents to hear. There was a Dr. Zucker in Toronto, Canada, and he worked for about 30 years with transgender kids who felt like they were a boy in a girl's body or a girl in a boy's body, and they came, and so he just gave them supportive care to help them with some of their anxiety, their depression, finding out what's going on in their life. He found one boy who was a single parent. His mom was a single parent, and she didn't seem to pay much attention to him. He seemed to like little girls, so he thought, well, if I would just be a girl, maybe my mom would love me. He helps him through that, and the boy then is perfectly happy that he's a boy later on as he gets through adolescence. And that's the general rule. Supportive care, loving them, helping them, not indulging, yeah, you are a girl in a boy's body, but just helping them through the depression, getting counseling as they need it, but good counseling, good solid counseling. And about 85% of these kids get through that and being very happy with a boy being a boy, a girl being a girl. And that you're not hearing. You are not hearing anything about that. They just need supportive care, loved, cared for, considered, trying to sort out what is going on, what's causing the anxiety, what's causing the depression.
So let me ask a quick question then. So most of these are happening in early adolescence. Are we talking middle school here? Are they, high school? What age are we looking at here?
Later elementary and middle school would certainly be some of the prime time, kind of the pre-adolescent and adolescence is when a lot of the anxiety and depression, girls kind of starting to go through their changes of life and maybe starting menstruation, and that's a very difficult time, and feeling not so happy with your body or with your face or how you feel, and you're happy one moment and sad the next. And so going through those struggles is kind of the pre-adolescent and adolescent. So elementary, late elementary, middle school, maybe early high school, depending on when you're going through that. So yes, those are the critical times when they need supportive care.
It's interesting, and I wanted to bring this up to you. My kids are all grown. So I don't feel like I have a finger on the pulse of, parenthood too much anymore, which is a shame. But I remember when I was a kid that there were two things that my parents never talked about. And one of them was sex. And I remember how I found out about menstruation. And that was, I got a book underneath the door, one day. And I really counted on my school nurse who kind of nursed me through that period of time. And I know there are a lot of parents out there that just feel they have this anxiety about talking to their kids about sex. They'll do things like name, penises PPs, and, give vaginas hoo-hoos, or, give them different names because they're just too uncomfortable to actually say the actual words. In your opinion, as a doctor, do you think it's part of it too? Isn't just, the social media? Because, by the way, parents can shut a lot of that down. And we've had parents on here who've talked about just that very thing. Isn't it the way you deal with your child and how you choose to speak with them? It really infantilizes, I think, kids for you to call, it's, well, your PP, and they're like 13 or 14 years old. I think we've moved beyond that stage, and maybe it's more time, for you to talk to them a little bit more frankly, and certainly you don't do that, in a very frank, specific way when they're very small. But as the more they age developmentally, you add a little bit more of a discussion, more to the discussion. But I think that's the point too, in just saying that out loud, is you have a discussion with your kids as they grow. But the frankness, I think, and just the parents being there for their kids and walking them through what's going to happen to them in life, I think is just somehow missing. I mean, am I shooting blanks there? Or, I mean, what do you think on that?
Oh, no, I think you're right. I think parents have kind of, certainly back in the day when we were doing the sex education stuff, you found out parents were just exactly what you said. They were not discussing it, were kind of afraid to talk about it. But, when I was a boy growing up, the average age of boys seeing Playboy was about 12. That's gone way down. And now pornography is just so prevalent that parents really, really need to be aware of that and understand that the kids are going to be hearing it, and you want them to hear it from you and your perspective. Yes, describe things as they are. Anatomy, God made the anatomy. We don't have to be ashamed of it. We just want to channel it in the right way. So, Jenny, I think that's really important in talking to your kids just about their bodies and sex. And
so do you have any ideas for parents to kind of give them some ideas as to, do you have any resources that you think might be really helpful for parents to be able to do that? Because I know a lot of, and then there are parents who they can't even talk to their doctor about it. They can't talk to each other. It's just like super embarrassing. Or do you have any resources that maybe we could put up, when this video goes up onto our channels? Do you have any resources that we could add to that might be helpful to parents?
Yeah, there's a couple I brought. A book that was really, really helpful to me, because like you said, I'm a family practitioner, and so I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself an expert on a lot of things. So I read some books here to try and get myself caught up. And one of them that's probably the best book, it's a little bigger book, but it's really the best book. It's called Irreversible Damage: Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, Abigail Schreier. And this book, Abigail Schreier is an excellent reporter. She has really resourced this book well, and is very, very fair, in terms of how she reports it, but also describing the dangers. And so that book is really, really good. And then this is one I get from Summit Ministries, Exposing the Gender Lie. Let's see if I can get that in there. And you can go to summit.org and download this. And this will help parents on trying to sort out what to talk to their kids and how to talk to their kids. So I'm looking at the time, and there's a couple of things that I want to really, really mention.
Please.
Before we get further into this, and this is for parents. One of the things that's been I think so destructive is the pressure from the culture and the NEA, and even some physician groups is, if your young daughter thinks she's a boy, and you don't help her move along that path socially and start calling him, and a boy name, and start helping her, move towards taking medication and maybe even surgery, that she's probably going to commit suicide. So there's been statements, would you rather have, I'm talking about little girls here, would you rather have a little boy that's alive or a little girl that's dead? And so, boy, if you're a parent, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to help her move along that path. And so it's really, really important to understand first what I mentioned about Dr. Zucker. If you can just give supportive care, almost 90% of these little girls will tend to be happy with being a girl if you can just help support them through that. So that's number one. The other thing is, there is no evidence. If you can just help support them. There is no evidence that going through the medical transitioning with medications, puberty blockers, the cross-sex hormones, or surgery, There's no evidence that there's a reduction in anxiety or depression or suicidality. In fact, there are some studies coming out of Sweden. Sweden, 30 years ago, started doing sexual reassignment surgery for girls and boys. And now, after 30 years, they're finding that the suicide rate is probably higher. It's certainly 20 times higher than the non-transgender population. So it's really important for parents to hear that is wrong. When you hear it stated that, would you rather have your child transition and live, or would you rather resist them and they're going to die and commit suicide? That is wrong.
Okay, so let's make that very, very clear. The risk of suicide is way higher when you enable a child to go down this path, especially on a long-term, even end stage kind of way.
Yes.
That's way higher. You're much more likely to lose that child there than you are to just speak to the child, give them supportive care, help them where they need to have help, and then they'll sort everything out themselves along the road. And you're telling us that there is very specific evidence to indicate that.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a doctor, Paul McHugh, and this is probably not well known, but back in the late 60s and 70s, Johns Hopkins was actually doing sex reassignment surgery for adults. So this was back, 50 years ago now almost. Sex reassignment surgery for adults. And what he found was, or what they found in that was, and again, these weren't adolescents that are struggling with, who they are and where they are. These were adults. They found that actually their depression and their anxiety was not better. Not necessarily worse. And again, these are adults, but not necessarily worse. And they basically shut down the surgery because they said, we're removing normal organs, and we're not really helping these people deal with their anxiety, depression, their neuroses, and all these types of things. So that was back 50 years ago in adults. Now we're talking about kids.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yes. So now we're talking about kids in adolescence and pre-adolescence with those struggles, and we're pushing them, and I say we, the culture, the NEA, is pushing them to move towards transition and taking puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. And if you take a puberty blocker when you're a little pre-adolescent, you stop, and you're not advancing in terms of your body growth, your mental growth. There's a lot of things there. And here's the other powerful thing for parents to know. If a young girl goes through a puberty blocker and then starts cross-sex hormones, testosterone, almost 100% of those kids will be infertile. So later on, if they decide, okay, I really am sorry that I did that, I would like to be a woman and a mom, done. She's not going to be able to have kids. Almost 100%. And so
the long-term implications of what the society seems to be pushing these kids to do is massively injurious. Massively
injurious. Yes. And a lot of the kids that then do that, especially the girls, wind up at about a third, it's a little over a third, will have breasts removed.
Yeah.
And literally the surgeons, there's one surgeon who performs this more than any person else out in Los Angeles, as you might expect. And this surgeon says, well, if you later on want breasts, you can go get some. And that's literally how she says, you can go get some. No, you can't. What you can get is lumps of fatty tissue covered with thin skin that they've tried to stretch out. It's non-sensitive and has no reproductive or breastfeeding value whatsoever. So it's massively injurious for these kids. And again, we're especially talking about girls because of this 1,000-fold increase with social media.
And one of the things that Jenny and I were talking about earlier this week, the ones that are graduating from high school now, in the third grade, they had all the testing and everything and all that pressure and anxiety, and kids were going home crying from the testing, and they went through all of that. And then a couple of years ago, they went through the COVID hysteria. So these kids that they are pressuring have already been through traumatic things brought to you by our schools. And I just wonder how much that impacts these kids being so dadgum confused about who they are, but just because of the trauma they've already lived through. And, you know, that is just, it's purely evil. And they're not able to think clearly on basic things like this is a girl and that is a boy. It's alarming.
Yeah, I think that's why we've got to be the adults in the room, and that's why I appreciate Rope. I mean, you guys are your goal is to help parents get involved.
Right.
Wake up, wake up. You can't trust the institution anymore. And again, I want to focus. There are great teachers and great administrators, but the cultural pressure, and that's one of the things I addressed at the Edmond School Board is, and with Dr. Grunwald. And I will say, Dr. Grunwald read my stuff. I asked to meet with her. She has met with me. I have sent her a couple of things, updates, and she's responded back to me. So I'm very, very, very thankful for that, and I'm excited, and I think she cares. And so, so yes, the general tendency though is for the NEA and the pressure from them and the culture is impacting our local schools, and so we, as parents, have to step up. In fact, this one lady that I was telling you kind of woke my eyes up. She said that here we are now with the pressure from the schools, from the NEA, the medical associations pushing this. And so it's time for us to step up. And she made a statement. She said, it's all hands on deck. And so that means parents, hopefully organizations like yourself, doctors like me that say, hey, look, you know, this is not right. We need to really help these kids through this time. So yes, everybody needs to step up in whatever role you can fill.
Right. And
We
also parents that get involved in their schools, there are good teachers out there that are just literally sitting ducks if they do the right thing. And parents can give cover to those good teachers and encourage them to do the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to point out something here. You've mentioned the NEA numerous times. That's the National Education Association. It's a national organization. This is where we get, you know, the teachers unions. There are two of them, NEA and AFT, American Federation for Teachers. And these are the two national teachers unions, essentially. Here in Oklahoma, we do have both of them, AFT and NEA. NEA has the majority of the contracts with schools in Oklahoma. But the problem isn't that we have them here in Oklahoma, because frankly, here in Oklahoma, they don't have a lot of sway. I mean, politically, I mean, they just haven't for numerous years. But here's what the problem is. So many years ago, over a decade ago, I was researching the PTA, parent-teacher organizations inside schools. And I found out that they had a connection to the National Education Association, that PTAs were actually brought along by NEA in order to keep parents busy and keep them from what they were looking at, what they were doing in the classroom, right? So the parents it would be exciting that they would get, hey, we get the parents in here for PTA meeting, but then basically all they'd be told to do is raise money for a gym, you know, or raise money for a blah or whatever. They were never meant to be an organization that was to give input to teachers or stand for their child on behalf of their children or whatever. But when I was doing that research, I looked way back at NEA has, well, both of the teachers unions have Marxist roots. They were meant to help teachers bring in progressive ideology into classrooms. That's, what their function was. And NEA has really excelled in this area. And I remember one year we got a number of hits on our website when I penned the story about the NEA's national meeting where they had the Drag Queen Coalition. So numerous and sundry teachers who were, drag queens in their, well, I don't know. I was going to say out of classroom life, but I'm not even sure that that's the case anymore. We see so many of them, acting out in classrooms today as well. But, and I don't think parents understood that these organizations aren't for parents. They're not for parents. They're not for kids. Now they will use the mantra, but it's for kids. When we're talking about money, we have to have money. It's for kids. But NEA, AFT, they're not for kids. They're not for parents. They're for teachers, and they're for pushing specific ideologies, and it was progressive ideologies.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned them numerous times, and parents, things come from someplace. You don't just go and then things appear. I mean, things originate somewhere. And it's a very sad thing, but it's a very true thing that education has extremely Marxist roots. And both of the fathers of public education were Marxist, if not socialist, if not both. And what we're seeing today is a direct result of what's going on in the classroom. So it's a sad thing to say. Oh, and I will say this too, and I'll put the link when I upload this to our Rumble channel, and I'll go back in our YouTube channel, and I'll put underneath that in the information that Dr. Evans has shared, that I'm also going to put in the link to, I just testified over the summer for the Senate interim study on sex education. And what we're doing for sex education, Dr. Evans has touched on that because it's still the same, except they've doubled down. Yeah. So now sex education.
And also all of these extra counselors that are, their organization is corrupt as all get out. So,
the American School Counselor Association, or ASCA, they're basically on board the same as NEA. So if your kid is struggling with transgender issues, I would get them to an outside counselor at this point. It would be my thought, is that some psychologist who you trust that would help your child through the struggle with anxiety and depression. Because I think the ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, are basically would help move the kids towards transition.
They said we've got video of some of their meetings, and it's not good. It's not good at all. It's bad.
Yeah. Again, these people are not for parents. So parents, keep that forefront in your mind. These people are not for parents. You are the parent. You're the only person who can stand for your child. So abdicating that responsibility to a school counselor is not going to get you anywhere in these particular situations. And I'm not saying every counselor out there is bad, but I'm saying the American School Counselors Association's counselors, if you're a good person and you want to join the ASCA, then I don't know what to tell you, because their website is full of progressive garbage, full of it. Yeah. And they're proud of it.
And unfortunately, as we've seen, anybody who resists the cultural pressure or the NEA pressure are basically considered pariahs. You're not the normal person, and in fact, we don't want you to talk. You could lose your job. Literally, there were doctors being threatened. If you prescribe hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin during the time of the COVID, you could lose your job. Pharmacies were refusing to fill prescriptions. So yes, you're exactly right. Those pressures And that's one of the reasons why I felt like, hey, we need to talk to our school board. We need to talk to our local people, because we want them to know, hey, we want to help you resist that pressure. We're going to be with you. Just like you said, Julia, there are teachers out there who want to do the right thing, but they need support, because otherwise, if they try to do the right thing, they're going to be resisting the powers that be.
Right.
And so as parents, we have to take back to be the powers that be, just like Janelle Shellam with her reviewing these books, so that we can really know what's being in the libraries and what they're being caused to read and to talk about and to discuss. We as parents have got to be there and to stand up and not trust the institutions that we used to be able to trust.
Right.
Well, I'm going to say something before I forget about it. And it's funny that you just started to talk, because I was going to turn it over to you, as a matter of fact, and say, the one person that's, here of the four of us is Michael, who is there for parents. And so parents, if you have something like this pop up, contact Michael and talk to him, and let's see if we can't figure out a way to either expose this or to help you with it. So go ahead, Michael.
Well, I just wanted to dovetail quickly on top of Dr. Evans' use of the word cultural pressure, because what I see, I have 5 kids from high school down to elementary school. They have a lot of friends. We're involved with a lot of their friends and their parents. And ultimately what we see in my kids' families, I mean, we don't discriminate in any way. We encourage our kids to be open and accepting of everybody. And we have friends with, all kinds of different families. And I'll just leave it at that. But ultimately what I see as a parent and a father is with this cultural pressure. I mean, it's really disempowering, and it's victimizing these kids. We send our kids to school to be educated in academics, and that should empower them. Yet it's in reverse. They're going to these schools and they're being completely disempowered. They're being taught that everything about their environment affects them, instead of them being at cause over their environment. Everything is happening to them. They're a victim of everything. And that's, I think, if Dr. Evans can touch on that a little bit more, it's so sad to see just how victimized these kids really are. And parents, like you said, just a small amount of support will keep them on the right path, because they are facing tremendous pressures. We have so many inputs now with these kids, everything from internet to phone. There's so many inputs constantly, 24/7, that we never experienced as parents. I mean, as kids growing up. So it's a kind of a two-way street, to where we've really got to look at empowering our kids and not letting them just be victimized by everything that's going around.
Yeah, I think that's really, really a great point. The cultural pressure coming at them from all the social media stuff and school and things that they hear on the news and those types of things. We've got to resist that. We've literally got to come against that. And you're right, Mike, the worst thing, I mean, I remember my dad telling me when I was growing up, said, son, nobody owes you anything. You've got to work and find your way through. We taught our kids the same thing. The worst thing you could ever do to your kids is make them a victim, because then that means somebody else is going to have to help them function in life. And so, yeah, we have to teach our kids that they can determine who they will be. Not
well, but the other thing too is when we teach our kids to be victims, it means that somebody will always have control over them.
Yeah.
And that's the key here, because that's how Marxists literally want populations to feel, is demoralized, degenerated, I mean, all of these things to keep them from having power, because who will fight back? Somebody who has power, somebody who has self-control, somebody who has self-respect. So you parents, you have to start thinking there's always a why for this stuff. And I know there are a lot of people who go, well, why is this happening? It is a very specific reason that this is happening. I mean, the communists told us they had an agenda.
Yeah.
And the Congress actually published the Communist Manifesto. And, the Marxists are just, the thought process of the communists. And so they can make these things happen. And the things that have been happening right now are meant to demean us, demoralize us, to push us down so that we are easily controlled. So somebody can come in like a little Mary and make us move like little marionettes. That's the thing that we don't want. And it's full on gaslighting, guys, full on gaslighting at this point, where they will say, well, we're doing this to give your child agency. Have you ever heard that word? Agency. And that's supposed to mean that they have self-control and self-respect and that kind of thing. But what they're saying is one thing, which is the definition of gaslighting, right? And doing something completely different. And so parents, like Dr. Evans said, you cannot believe your own eyes, and you can't believe your own ears anymore.
And just to speak to that cultural pressure also, I'm sure Dr. Evans has probably seen these publications, but I've seen examples by Christian, patriot, conservative people where they show a high school maybe in San Francisco or Los Angeles that's, upwards of 50 or 60% transgender, opposed to some high school in Texas or Oklahoma, where you see it truly is the cultural pressure that's being put that's victimizing these kids rather than, just allowing somewhat of a natural process in some cases that just with proper counseling and parental guidance would be corrected.
Yeah. So I know we're getting close to time. There was a few things that this lady, Abigail Schreier, suggested. And don't get your kid a smartphone. Now, that may sound radical, but don't get your kid a smartphone so that they can be on social media. Nearly every problem teenagers face traces itself back to the iPhone and in many cases the TikTok. Number 2, don't relinquish your authority as a parent. That's what we've been talking about. You continue to be in control and know what is going on at the school. Talk with your kids. Number 3, don't support gender ideology in your child's education. Do not stand for it. Let's say we do not want that. We want you to teach academics. We do not want you to tell our kids about gender ideology. We will teach them. Reintroduce privacy into your home, which means you're not putting stuff out on social media. You're keeping your life private just to your own family. Consider big steps to separate your daughter, and again, we're talking mostly daughters in this social thing that's happened. Some families moved away from the school they were at. Now here in Oklahoma, that's probably not quite as necessary, but you may need to move them out of the friendships they're in if those friendships are really dragging them down. You have to take the big steps. Don't be afraid to do it. Your child will scream, will call you terrible names and hate you, but you want to do the right thing for them in the long term. And don't ever let your little girls not love who they are.
Yes. Amen to that.
Yeah. So those.
Well, Dr. Evans, we really appreciate you being with us today. And, it's very sad for me. We usually have a number of people who join us live for our, live broadcast. And we have not really had many on today. And I really believe it's because people don't want to deal with this issue. They just don't. Yeah. It's the same problem we've had as Christians. If you say, hey, I love everybody, but I'm not going to tell you it's okay to be gay. I love everybody, but I'm not going to tell you it's okay to cheat on your husband or your wife. I mean, there is a really sad situation that we're in today, which is truth literally hurts people. It just hurts them. We have churches that have abdicated their their standing in terms of biblical truth. They just don't even do it anymore because, well, that might hurt somebody's feelings. Well, and some people who watch this, may not have a religion, and that's fine. I don't care.
Yeah.
But let's just look at it, because it's, that's what this country was founded on. Do what you want, have your own religion. Don't have a religion. But the point of it is this: you cannot enable somebody to do something that isn't healthy for them because you're unwilling to hurt their feelings, and then be upset when they are in really deep trouble. Alcoholics then who need help, kids who have gone too far into the transgender issue and then have committed suicide after getting reconstructive surgery or after getting, gender reassignment surgery. I mean, you are never going to hurt a child telling the truth as much as you will allowing a child to do something that simply isn't physically or emotionally good for them because you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Oh boy, that's a big part of the lesson about what parents need to take away from this is the truth will cause pain and suffering in the short term, but truth wins out. Truth does win out, and so your child will be so grateful that you were willing to take the hits, to love them and help them through this.
Well, I know we're at the end, but I just want to encourage parents, because I know parents sometimes can say, well, and we all can say this. So, I mean, come on. Well, you don't know what my circumstances are. You just don't know how it's working. Well, and I get that. Everybody has their own set of shoes to walk in. But I want to tell you this. We adopted a child who was about 2 when we adopted her, and she's a very strong-willed person. And we had a great deal of trouble bringing up this child and bringing her into our home. And we had lying problems, we had behavioral problems, we had all kinds of problems. And instead of just saying, well, it'll get better on its own, I just put her under my thumb. I took away the phone. One time she slammed the door. I took the door completely off the hinges after I'd warned her 3 times not to do that. She had to live without a door on her room for a whole week because I just got tired of that. I mean, I did so many things that caused her to cry and scream and wail. And that child, I'm not joking, would throw herself on the floor and do the whole banging and screaming thing. And I went through that over and over again. And she's only 21 now. But before she even turned 21, she sent me a text one day. She said, I just was I had lunch with an old friend. And she said, all I can tell you is I may not have liked it at the time, but I am so grateful that you hung in there with me and you did the hard things because I feel like I've turned out to be a good person. Yeah. And it made me feel so much better because no, it was not fun. It wasn't. I would go to bed crying sometimes because we had a fit and screaming match, and I had to chase her down the driveway to get her phone back from her. I mean, I can't tell you the number of things that I had to do that were just so hard that made me go to bed in tears and think, why have I done this? I just hate my life. But, to have that text from her saying, I see this girl and I know how she was raised, and I look at me and I know how I was raised, and you did the right thing. That meant everything. And you have to, guys, you got to hang in there. You can't, you're not their friend. You are not their friend. They have friends. You're the adult in the room, as Dr. Evans said. You are the adult. So be the adult. Be there. Do the hard things, and your child will appreciate you and love you for that. And you will be doing your child the best service you possibly can as a parent.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that.
So, all right, guys, if there's anything else, let me know. I was going to mention who we have. If you're think of something while I'm looking. Oh, on Monday, we have Julia's cousin, Allison.
Wednesday,
Wednesday. What did I say?
Monday.
It's a day. Wednesday. They all end in day.
Monday is the newsletter, so sign up for the newsletter.
And tell them how to sign up for the newsletter, Julia.
Well, you can send me an email at Julia C. Julia.
You're Julia at.
Julia at rope2.org, or I have to find the other ways because Constant Contact changed it on us, and so I'll have to figure all that out. But get signed up for our newsletters.
Excellent. And what is Allison going to talk about with us on Wednesday?
Allison is an excuse buster. We get people on our some usually Facebook, but we get people that feel inadequate to either homeschool or intervene in different situations in their kids' lives. And not to brag on my cousin too much, but Allison Wanjon, some of y'all may know her in the audience, but she's got 5 kids, and she has overcome pretty much every objection I've ever seen on our Facebook page. She went through a messy divorce. She's still homeschooled. She now has helped her church put together a homeschool co-op, which I would love to see every single church in the state of Oklahoma open their doors to parents and teachers that want a better situation other than the government schools that we have now. Anyway, she's done all of that, and I just want to pick her brain and let her encourage all the parents out there that think they can't do it because of their circumstances, because you can do it. You can do it.
Awesome. And so that's Wednesday the 10th, and then on Friday the 12th we're going to have Kendra Wesson, who is she's being confirmed on Wednesday as a state school board member. So we'll talk to Kendra on Friday. So does anybody have anything before we get out for today?
Well, I do. I just want to tell parents something that I tell my kids daily, every one of my kids, that no one can affect their feelings unless they let them affect them. I constantly empower my kids and tell them that they are the source of how they feel. No outside source can affect how they feel.
Right. Good.
That is correct. And Dr. Evans, thank you so much for being with us today. It's just been a blessing. If you've got anything extra that you'd like parents to know about, that you'd like me to add other than the 2 books, please text me or email me, and I'll add that to the offline version of this particular video. So thank you so much. And thank you for being the parent that goes to bat for your kids and now other people's kids.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for what you do. Really appreciate it. So.
Well, we're going to keep going as long as we can. So,
yes.
All right, everybody, have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you again on next Wednesday, the 10th. All right. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.